The judge's words hit like a bullet. Marry in 28 days or lose everything. Caleb Hardin stood frozen on his porch, watching them ride away. 7 years of bleeding for this land, 7 years of building something from nothing, and now they wanted him to beg some stranger to save it. The woman arrived 3 days later. Auburn hair, green eyes that didn't flinch. The town called her a spinster, a charity case, an old maid no decent man would touch. Margaret Sinclair called herself a survivor. She was about to prove them all wrong. If you want to see how a forced marriage became the greatest love story Wyoming ever witnessed, stay with me until the end. Subscribe now and drop your city in the comments. Let me see how far this story travels. Now let me tell you how two people who swore they needed no one discovered they needed each other. Okay. The knock came at dawn. Caleb was already awake. Sleep had abandoned him weeks ago, somewhere between the first frost and the growing certainty that this winter would be the hardest yet. He'd been staring at cold coffee when the sound cut through the silence. 3 riders. Judge Crawford's gray gelding in front. Hell. He grabbed his coat and stepped outside before they could knock again. The cold bit into his skin. Wyoming showing her teeth early. Judge. Caleb didn't move from the porch. Whatever you're selling, I ain't buying. Crawford dismounted slow, his joints protesting. 60 years of territorial law had worn grooves into his face. He pulled a folded paper from his coat like a man drawing a weapon. New law, Hardin, passed in Cheyenne last month. Don't care. You will. Crawford's eyes swept over the ranch. The barn Caleb had built, board by board. The corral. The house that had taken 2 winters to finish. All claims over 500 acres require proof of permanent family settlement, marriage, household, roots. Caleb's hands curled into fists. I got roots. Built every inch of this place myself. That ain't what they mean. Then what? A wife. Crawford cut him off. You need a wife. 28 days, or the territory reclaims your land. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. You're joking. I look like I'm joking. I've worked this land 7 years, paid every fee, filed every. Don't matter. Crawford held out the paper. Politicians in Cheyenne decided single men are speculators. They want families, communities, not... He gestured at Caleb. Whatever you are. I'm a rancher. You're unmarried, same thing to them. Caleb snatched the document. Read it twice. The words blurred together: permanent settlement, family establishment, forfeiture upon non-compliance. This is insane. This is the law. Then the law is wrong. Maybe so. Crawford mounted his horse. But it's still the law. 28 days, Hardin. Find yourself a wife or find yourself a new life. They rode off. Caleb stood on his porch until he couldn't see them anymore. Until the cold seeped through his coat and into his bones. Until the paper in his hand crumpled from how hard he was gripping it. 7 years. 7 years of bleeding and sweating and freezing. 7 years of telling himself that if he just worked hard enough, if he just kept his head down and his hands busy, no one could ever take anything from him again. He'd been wrong. 2 days later, he rode into Cedar Flats. Not because he wanted to, because he had no choice. The territorial office had no appeals. The deadline had no extensions. And Caleb Hardin had exactly 0 prospects for a wife. The town wasn't much. 300 souls on a good day, most of them minding everybody's business but their own. Caleb avoided the place when he could. People asked questions, expected things, wanted pieces of him he didn't have to give. Mrs. Owen's boarding house sat at the end of Main Street. Caleb tied his horse and stood on the porch for a long moment, hating everything about this. The door opened. Took you long enough? Harriet Owens was 60 if she was a day built like a fence post and twice as stubborn. Figured you'd show up yesterday. News travels. Always does. Her eyes measured him. You hear about the Sinclair woman? Maybe. Maybe ain't good enough. She's got other options, you know. Tom Garrett came sniffing around yesterday. So did Pete Morrison. Tom Garrett beat his last wife. Pete Morrison was 53 and missing most of his teeth. I ain't like them. Prove it. Mrs. Owens stepped aside. Parlor's through there. Don't waste her time. Caleb walked in. The parlor was small and stuffy, crammed with furniture that looked like it would break if you breathed on it. He stood by the window, too restless to sit, turning his hat in his hands. Footsteps. Light but deliberate. Mr. Harden? He turned. She wasn't what he expected. None of the softness he associated with Eastern women. No simpering. No downcast eyes. Margaret Sinclair stood in the doorway like she owned it, tall and straight-backed, with auburn hair pulled back tight and eyes the color of new leaves. 28, Crawford had said. Old Maid, the town whispered. Looking at her now, Caleb couldn't figure out why. Miss Sinclair? Mrs. Owens explained your situation. She walked into the room without waiting to be invited. Sat in one of the fragile chairs like it was a throne. You need a wife to keep your land. I need a place to survive the winter. She thought we might find common ground. Direct, no games. Caleb felt something shift in his chest. Respect, maybe, or relief. That's about the size of it. Then let's discuss terms. Terms. You didn't think I'd agree to marry a stranger without conditions. One eyebrow rose. Sit down, Mr. Harden. You're making me nervous. He sat. The chair groaned under him. I'll be straight with you, Caleb said. I need a legal wife. Someone to satisfy the territory's requirements. I ain't looking for romance or whatever else marriages are supposed to be. I'm looking for a solution. And what do I get out of this solution? A home, food, shelter from winter. My ranch is solid. House is warm. You'd have your own room, your own space. My own room. Margaret's voice was flat. A marriage in name only. That's the idea. And after, once the legal requirements are met, then we figure out what works. You want to stay, you stay. You want to leave. I'll give you enough to start over somewhere else. Silence stretched between them. Margaret's fingers tapped against her knee. Once, twice. Mr. Harden, why should I trust you? You shouldn't. The honesty surprised him as much as her. You don't know me. I don't know you. Trust ain't part of this deal. Then what is survival? He leaned forward. Look, I ain't gonna pretend this is anything but desperate. I need to keep my land. You need somewhere to live. We can help each other, or we can both freeze this winter. Your choice. Margaret studied him. Those green eyes seeing too much. You're not what I expected, she said finally. Neither are you. What did you expect? Someone grateful. Someone who'd jump at the chance to be rescued. Her laugh was short and sharp. I've been taking care of myself since I was 12, Mr. Harden. I didn't come 2,000 miles to be rescued. I came to find something I couldn't find back east. What's that? Respect. The word hung in the air. A chance to be judged by what I can do, not by who I failed to marry. Caleb sat back. This woman wasn't desperate, wasn't weak, wasn't anything like the simpering bride he'd imagined when Crawford first delivered his ultimatum. She was something else entirely. Come to the ranch, he heard himself say. 1 week, no commitment. See the place. See what you be getting into. At the end of the week, we decide together. And if I say no, then I pay your stage fare to wherever you want to go. No obligations. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. 1 week, she said. But I have conditions. Name them. First, separate quarters. I'm not sharing a bed with a stranger. Agreed. Second, I want to see your financial records. If I'm tying myself to your property, I need to know what I'm tying myself to. He hesitated. Those records were his business. His alone. Agreed, he said anyway. Third, she stood and he stood with her. I'm not a housekeeper, not a servant, not a decoration. If I agree to this marriage, it's as your partner. Equal say, equal stake, equal respect. Every word was reasonable. Every word also felt like giving up control. Caleb extended his hand. Deal. Margaret took it. Her grip was firm, her palm rough with calluses he hadn't expected. Tomorrow, she said. First light. I'll be here. She released his hand but held his gaze. Mr. Harden. Yeah. I'm not what you wanted, but I might be what you need. She walked out before he could respond. Caleb stood alone in the stuffy parlor, his hand still tingling where she'd touched it, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. She arrived the next morning with 2 bags and a trunk full of books. Caleb had expected complaints about the cold, about the rough wagon, about the emptiness stretching in every direction. Eastern women always complained. Margaret didn't say a word. She sat beside him on the wagon bench wrapped in a wool coat that had seen better days, watching the landscape unfold with an expression he couldn't read. When they passed the frozen creek, she leaned forward slightly. When they crested a ridge and the valley opened below them, her breath caught. But she didn't speak, didn't ask, just watched. It made him nervous. Ranch is another hour, he said, just to break the silence. I know. Mrs. Owens told me. She tell you anything else? That you're stubborn as a mule and twice as difficult. Margaret glanced at him, almost smiled. She said it like a compliment. Harriet's got a strange sense of humor. She said you built this ranch yourself, that you arrived 7 years ago with nothing but a horse and $100 and turned empty land into something real. She talks too much. She admires you. Margaret pulled her coat tighter against the wind. So do I, if that matters. Most men inherit what they have. You built yours from scratch. That takes something. Caleb didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. When the ranch came into view, he watched her face, couldn't help it. The house sat in its protected hollow smoke rising from the chimney where Sam had kept the fire going. Behind it the barn, the bunkhouse, the corral. Everything Caleb had bled for laid out like an offering. It's solid, Margaret said. He'd expected more, something like awe or admiration. Instead, he got solid. But she was still looking, still taking it in. And something in her expression suggested that solid might be the highest compliment she knew how to give. Come on. He helped her down from the wagon. I'll show you inside. The house was warm at least. Sam had built the fire up before riding out to check the cattle. Caleb saw the space through Margaret's eyes, the rough furniture, the bare walls, the kitchen with its nearly empty shelves. A bachelor's house. Functional. Empty. Your room's through there, he pointed. I'll bring your trunk. Margaret walked through the space slowly. Her fingers trailed over the table he'd built during his first winter, paused on the chair that wobbled because he'd never gotten around to fixing it. Stopped at the kitchen, where she opened cupboards and found dust and canned beans and not much else. When did you last eat something that wasn't from a can? I eat fine. That's not what I asked. She turned to face him. Something had shifted in her expression. Something almost like concern. Mr. Harden. Caleb. Caleb. She tested the name. You've been surviving, not living. There's a difference. Surviving's kept me alive this long. And lonely. She said it soft, not an accusation, an observation. This house could be a home. It isn't, not yet. He should have been offended. Would have been from anyone else. But Margaret wasn't attacking him. She was just seeing him. In a way no one had bothered to see him in years. I'll make a list, she said. Supplies we'll need. We can go to town tomorrow. We just came from town. Then we'll go again. She was already moving toward the trunk he'd carried in, pulling out paper and pencil. If I'm going to decide whether I can live here, I need to see what's possible, not just what you've settled for. She disappeared into her room. Caleb stood alone in his own house, feeling like a stranger in it. They went to town the next day, and the day after that. On the third day, Margaret cooked dinner. Caleb came in from checking the fence lines to find the house transformed. The table had been cleared and set properly. The kitchen smelled like something other than dust and regret. And Margaret stood at the stove in an apron she'd brought from Philadelphia, stirring something that made his stomach clench with hunger he hadn't known he felt. "Sit," she said without turning around. He sat. 10 minutes later, she set a plate in front of him. Roast chicken, potatoes mashed with real butter, carrots glazed with honey, bread still warm from the oven. Caleb stared at it. "Something wrong?" Margaret asked. "I ain't eaten like this since—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Since my mother died." Something flickered across her face. She sat across from him, her own plate more modest. "Eat before it gets cold." He ate. It was the best meal he'd had in 15 years. Maybe the best meal he'd ever had. And it wasn't just the food, it was the warmth of it, the care. Someone had stood at his stove and made something for him, not because they had to, not because he'd paid them, just because. "Thank you," he said when his plate was empty. Margaret nodded. "You're welcome." They sat in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was something else, something Caleb didn't have a name for. "My aunt used to say that cooking was beneath educated women," Margaret said eventually. "She thought I should spend my time on needlepoint and French. Instead, I snuck into the kitchen whenever I could. The cook taught me everything she knew." "Why?" "Because cooking is useful." Margaret's fingers traced the edge of her cup. "You can survive on theory and education and proper manners, but you can't eat them. I wanted to know how to do things. Real things. Things that mattered." "You learned." "I learned." She looked up at him. "And now I'm here, in Wyoming, cooking dinner for a stranger who might become my husband. Strange how things work out." "Strange," she agreed, "but not always bad." After dinner, she washed the dishes. Caleb dried. They moved around each other in the small kitchen, not quite touching, hyper-aware of every near miss. "I should warn you about something," Margaret said, her hands still in the soapy water. Caleb tensed. "What?" "I looked at your account books today, while you were out." He should have been angry, should have felt violated. But her voice held no apology, and he found he didn't want one. "And someone's been stealing from you." The words landed like a punch. "What?" "Small amounts. Regular intervals. Feed. Supplies. Medical equipment for the horses." She dried her hands and walked to the table where she'd laid out his ledgers. "See this, you bought 200 pounds of feed in October. Used 130 by your own notes. That's 70 pounds missing. Could have used more than I wrote. Once maybe, but the pattern repeats, over and over for months. Someone with access to your supplies has been taking just enough to avoid notice." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Billy Crane." "Who?" "Hand I hired last spring. Worked Roundup, knows the property, knows where I keep things." "Would he have reason to steal from you?" "Don't need a reason, just opportunity." Caleb slammed his fist on the table. The ledgers jumped. "Damn it, I trusted him." Margaret didn't flinch. "Trust isn't the problem. Your bookkeeping is. You've been so focused on the physical work that you never noticed what was walking out the door." "So this is my fault?" "No." Her voice softened. "But it's your responsibility to fix, and you can't fix what you can't see." She was right. He hated that she was right. "Show me," he said. "Show me everything." For the next 2 hours, Margaret walked him through his own finances, showed him how to track inventory properly, how to separate personal expenses from ranch business, how to spot patterns that meant problems. She did it without condescension, without making him feel stupid. Just clear, patient explanation, treating him like someone capable of learning. By the end, Caleb's head was spinning, but he understood. "You'll need to check the cattle tomorrow," Margaret said, closing the last ledger. "If someone's stealing supplies, they might be stealing stock too. I'll ride out at first light." "We'll ride out." She met his eyes. "If I'm going to be part of this ranch, I need to see all of it." "We, not you. We." "You ride." "Since I was 7. Something like a smile crossed her face. "I'm full of surprises, Caleb." "I'm starting to notice." They found the missing cattle the next afternoon. Or rather, they found where the missing cattle had been, a section of fence cut clean and hastily repaired, tracks leading southeast toward rough country, and 15 fewer head than Caleb's count said he should have. "Son of a bitch," Caleb breathed. Margaret dismounted, examining the fence repair. "Recent. Less than a week. Billy knows this land, knows my schedule, knew I'd be focused on winter prep. We should report this. Marshall's 3 days ride. Then we send word, document everything, improve our security." Margaret's voice was calm, practical. "Charging after them alone gets people killed, Caleb. We do this smart, or we don't do it at all." "We." Again. He looked at her. Really looked. This woman who'd been in his life for 4 days, who'd reorganized his kitchen, exposed his theft problem, and now stood beside him in a freezing pasture, talking about their security like she already belonged here. "Why are you doing this?" The question came out rough. "You could have stayed in town, waited out the week in comfort. Instead, you're out here in the cold helping me chase rustlers." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Because this might be my land too," she said finally. "Because if I'm going to marry you and I'm starting to think I might, then your problems are my problems. Your cattle are my cattle. Your fight is my fight. You barely know me." "I know enough." She mounted her horse. "I know you built something from nothing. I know you work harder than any 3 men. I know you've been alone so long you've forgotten how to let anyone help you." Her eyes met his, steady, unflinching. "I know you're scared, Caleb, same as me, but maybe that's okay. Maybe 2 scared people can be brave together." Caleb couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. "Come on," Margaret said. "We should get back before dark." They rode home in silence, but something had changed. Some wall that Caleb had spent 7 years building had developed a crack, and Margaret Sinclair had walked right through it. That night they sat by the fire. Margaret had found one of his few books, a battered copy of Robinson Crusoe left behind by some forgotten hand. She read quietly, lamplight catching the red in her hair. Caleb sat across from her, not working, not planning, just being. It felt strange, being still, being present with another person. "Can I ask you something?" His voice came out rusty. Margaret looked up. "Of course." "Why'd you really come out here? Not the version you told me before. The real reason." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she set the book aside. "My father died when I was 12. Her voice was soft, distant. "Consumption. I watched him cough his life out over 3 months. There wasn't anything anyone could do. I'm sorry. My mother remarried within the year. A wealthy man. Respectable. He didn't want me around." Margaret's hands folded in her lap. "I was sent to my aunt's house in Philadelphia. She took me in because she had to, not because she wanted to. That ain't right. It's common." A bitter smile. "Surplus girls. That's what they called us. Too many daughters, not enough prospects. I was smart, which made it worse. Smart girls ask questions. Smart girls have opinions. Smart girls don't know their place. Your place. Married, silent, small." She looked at the fire. I refused, so they waited for me to fail. Year after year, suitor after suitor, I wasn't sweet enough or pretty enough or compliant enough for any of them. And every year I became more of a burden, more of an embarrassment, more of a... Her voice broke. Caleb moved without thinking, crossed the space between them, sat beside her on the worn sofa. "You ain't any of those things," he said quietly. "You don't know that. I know you reorganized my books in one afternoon. I know you spotted a theft problem I missed for months. I know you ride like you were born to it, and cook like an angel, and speak your mind without apology." He turned to face her. "Whatever they told you back east, they were wrong." Margaret's eyes were bright, wet. "My aunt died last year," she whispered. "My uncle gave me 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live. I used every penny I'd saved to buy a ticket west. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't stay there anymore. Couldn't spend another year being told I was too much and not enough at the same time. So you came here." "So I came here." She laughed shaky and thin. "To marry a stranger in the middle of nowhere. Some escape." "Could be worse." Caleb's hand found hers. Her fingers were cold. He wrapped them in his own. "Could be Tom Garrett." A startled laugh escaped her. "Mrs. Owens warned me about him." "Smart woman." They sat in silence. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside. And somewhere in the quiet, something settled between them. An understanding. A recognition. Two people who'd been told they were too difficult to love finding shelter in each other. Caleb. "Yeah. I think I want to stay." His heart stuttered. "You sure?" "No." She turned to look at him. "I'm terrified. But I've been terrified my whole life, and running from it never helped. At least here I'd be terrified with someone. That's more than I had before. I ain't easy to live with. Neither am I. I don't know how to be married. Don't know how to be anything but alone." "Then we'll learn." Her fingers tightened around his. "That's what partners do." Partners. The word settled into his chest, took root. "Okay," he said. "Okay. Okay. Let's do this. You and me. Partners." Margaret smiled. And for the first time in 7 years, Caleb Hardin felt something other than alone. He felt hope. The morning after Margaret agreed to stay, Caleb woke before dawn and lay in the darkness listening. Her room was quiet. No sound of movement. No indication she'd changed her mind in the night and slipped away. He'd half expected to find her gone, the whole conversation revealed as some fever dream his lonely mind had conjured. But when he finally rose and opened his door, the smell of coffee hit him first. She was already up, already dressed, already standing at his stove like she'd been doing it for years instead of days. "You're awake," she said without turning. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." She poured 2 cups, handed him one. Their fingers brushed. "Kept thinking about what we agreed to last night, wondering if you'd change your mind." "I don't change my mind easy." "Neither do I." She met his eyes over the rim of her cup. "So we're really doing this. We're really doing this." For a moment, neither of them moved. The weight of what they'd committed to hung between them, heavy and strange and terrifying. Then Margaret set down her cup. "We should go to town today, file the papers, make it official before either of us loses our nerve. Today. You have 24 days left. The sooner we file, the sooner your land is secure." She paused. "Unless you want to wait." "No." The word came out faster than he intended. "No, you're right. Let's go." They rode into Cedar Flats before noon. The Territorial Land Office was a cramped building that smelled of dust and old ink. Morrison, the clerk, looked up when they entered. His eyes moved from Caleb to Margaret and back again. Something knowing crossed his face. "Heard you might be coming," Morrison said. "Judge Crawford mentioned something about the new settlement law." "We're here to file a joint deed," Caleb said. Miss Sinclair and I are getting married. Morrison's eyebrows rose. That was fast. Time's short. Caleb pulled out the ranch deed from his coat. What do we need to do? The paperwork took 2 hours. Forms in triplicate. Signatures on every page. Margaret's name written beside his on documents that had only ever held his alone. Every time she signed, Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. Equal stake. Equal ownership. Half of everything he'd built now legally hers. It should have felt like loss. Instead, it felt like relief. You'll need witnesses for the wedding, Morrison said when they'd finished. And a minister. Reverend Whitmore's the only one in town. We'll talk to him next. One more thing. Morrison leaned forward. This deed transfer makes Miss Sinclair co-owner effective immediately. The marriage just formalizes the family household requirement. You understand what that means? Caleb looked at Margaret. She looked back at him. It means we're partners, Margaret said, legally and otherwise. Yes, ma'am. Morrison stamped the final document. That's exactly what it means. They left the land office with copies of the new deed tucked safely in Margaret's bag. Outside, the winter sun was weak, but present, turning the snow-covered street into something almost bright. That felt permanent, Margaret said quietly. It is permanent. I know. She pulled her coat tighter. It's just, an hour ago, I had nothing. Now I own half a ranch. Having second thoughts? No. She shook her head. Just adjusting. It's a lot to absorb. Caleb understood. He'd spent 7 years as sole owner of Iron Creek Ranch. Now he wasn't. Now there was someone else whose name sat beside his on every document whose signature mattered as much as his own. It was terrifying. It was also somehow a relief. Come on, he said. Let's find the Reverend. Thomas Whitmore was a thin man in his 40s who'd been preaching in Cedar Flats for 15 years. He'd baptized babies, buried the dead, and married more couples than he could count. When Caleb explained their situation, Whitmore listened without judgment. 3 weeks from today, Whitmore said. That gives you time to prepare, to be sure this is what you both want. We're sure, Caleb said. Are you? Whitmore's eyes moved to Margaret. Miss Sinclair, you've been in this territory less than 2 weeks. You've known Mr. Hardin for even less. Marriage is a serious commitment. There's no shame in taking more time. Margaret's chin lifted. Reverend, I've spent my entire life being told to wait. Wait for the right man. Wait for the right opportunity. Wait for permission to live my own life. I'm done waiting. Whitmore studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. 3 weeks then. December 20th. I'll have the church ready. They scheduled the ceremony and left. On the way back to the ranch, Margaret was quiet. Caleb let the silence stretch, giving her space to process everything that had happened. They'd filed papers, transferred property, set a wedding date. In a few hours, they'd transformed their tentative agreement into something concrete and binding. What are you thinking? He asked finally. I'm thinking about my aunt. Margaret's voice was distant. She always said I'd die alone, that no respectable man would want a woman as difficult as me. She was wrong. Was she? Margaret turned to look at him. You didn't want me, Caleb. You wanted a solution. I happened to be convenient. The words stung because they were true, or had been true a week ago. Maybe that's how it started, he admitted. But it ain't how it is now. Then how is it now? Caleb struggled to find the words. He wasn't good at this. Wasn't good at saying what he felt, or even knowing what he felt in the first place. You make sense to me, he said finally. The way you think, the way you see things, the way you don't back down from a fight. He shook his head. I've been alone so long I forgot what it was like to have someone in my corner. You reminded me. Margaret was quiet. That's not love, she said eventually. No, but it might be something better. What? Respect. Caleb looked at her. I respect you, Margaret. Your mind, your strength, your refusal to be less than you are. That's more than most marriages start with. Something shifted in her expression, softened. Maggie. What? Call me Maggie. Margaret's too formal for someone I'm about to marry. Maggie. He tested it. The name fit her better. Less stiff. More real. All right, Maggie it is. She smiled. Small, but genuine. We're going to be okay, she said. Aren't we? We're going to try. It wasn't a promise, but it was enough. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Caleb had expected the work to continue as usual. Instead, Maggie transformed everything she touched. The house became cleaner, more organized, more like an actual home instead of a place to sleep between chores. She established systems for the kitchen for the accounts for tracking supplies. She learned the property riding out with him every day until she knew the fence lines and water sources as well as he did. But more than that, she changed the rhythm of his life. Meals became something to look forward to instead of just fuel. Evenings became quiet hours by the fire instead of lonely stretches of darkness. Conversations became exchanges of ideas instead of silence, broken only by necessary words. Caleb found himself talking more than he had in years. About the ranch. About his plans for expansion. About the fears that kept him awake at night and the dreams he'd almost stopped believing in. And Maggie listened. Not with the polite disinterest he'd expected from an Eastern woman, but with genuine attention. She asked questions, offered suggestions, challenged him when she thought he was wrong. It was disconcerting. It was also exhilarating. You're different than you were, Sam observed one afternoon. They were mending fence together, the cold biting through their gloves. More, I don't know, present. What's that supposed to mean? Before you were always somewhere else in your head, planning the next thing, worrying about the next problem. Sam shrugged. Now you're here, actually here. It's nice. Caleb didn't know what to say to that, so he changed the subject. But that night, lying awake in his bed, he thought about Sam's words. Present. He hadn't been present in years. Hadn't allowed himself to be. Being present meant feeling things. And feeling things meant vulnerability. And vulnerability meant pain. Maggie was changing that, whether he wanted her to or not. The first real conflict came on the 12th day. Caleb had decided to hire additional hands for winter. The ranch needed more workers, and with the cattle losses, they'd discovered extra eyes would help protect against further theft. He'd sent word to town, and 2 men had responded: Billy Crane's cousin Pete and a drifter named Wilson, who came recommended by another rancher. He'd agreed to hire them both without consulting Maggie. She found out when they arrived. Who are they? She'd been in the kitchen when the wagon pulled up. Now she stood on the porch beside Caleb, watching the 2 men unload their gear. New hands. Pete Crane and Wilson something or other. Pete Crane. Her voice was careful. Related to Billy Crane. Cousin. Maggie went very still. You hired Billy Crane's cousin. The same Billy Crane who's been stealing from you. Pete's not Billy. How do you know? Because I know. Pete's worked ranches all over the territory. Got a good reputation. And you verified this. Caleb felt his temper rise. I don't need to verify every decision with you. You do when it affects our property, our security. Maggie's eyes flashed. We agreed to be partners, Caleb. Partners consult each other before making major decisions. Hiring hands ain't major. Hiring the cousin of a known thief while we're still losing cattle isn't major. Her voice rose. What were you thinking? I was thinking we need help. I was thinking winter's coming and there's too much work for 3 people. I was thinking, you weren't thinking about me at all. The words cut through his anger like a knife. You made this decision alone because that's what you've always done. because consulting someone else feels like weakness to you. That ain't fair, isn't it? Maggie stepped closer. Tell me honestly, Caleb, did it even occur to you to ask my opinion? Silence. Because she was right. It hadn't occurred to him. He'd seen a problem, found a solution, and implemented it. Same as he'd done for 7 years. I'm used to handling things myself, he said finally. I know. But that's not what we agreed to. Maggie's voice softened, but only slightly. I didn't sign those papers to be a silent partner. I didn't agree to this marriage so you could keep making decisions alone while I smile and nod. What do you want me to do? Send them away? No, they're already here, and we do need the help. She crossed her arms. But the next time you want to hire someone, or buy something significant, or make any decision that affects both of us, you ask me first. That's not a request. Caleb's jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed at him to push back, to assert his authority, to remind her that this had been his ranch for 7 years before she showed up. But another part of him, a newer, quieter part, recognized that she was right. Fine, he said. I'll ask next time. Thank you. But Maggie, yes. This goes both ways. You want to make a decision that affects the ranch, you ask me to. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Agreed. They stood there for a moment, the tension slowly draining. Then Maggie nodded toward the new hands. Introduce me. If they're going to work here, they should know who I am. Who are you? Their employer. She smiled thinly. Same as you. Pete, Crane, and Wilson turned out to be decent workers. Pete was nothing like his cousin, quiet, hard-working, seemingly honest. Wilson was older, experienced, and grateful for steady work through the winter months. They settled into the bunkhouse with Sam and fell into the rhythm of ranch life without complaint. But Caleb watched them carefully, and he noticed that Maggie watched them too. You don't trust them, he said one evening after the hands had retired for the night. I don't trust anyone I don't know. Maggie was reviewing the weekly inventory, a habit she'd established their first week together. But I'm willing to be proven wrong. What would it take? Time, consistency, a lack of things going missing. She looked up. The same things it takes for anyone to earn trust. Including me. The question surprised them both. Maggie set down her pencil. You're different. How? Because we're in this together. Whatever happens with the ranch, with the cattle, with anything, we both have something to lose. She met his eyes. That doesn't guarantee trust, but it's a foundation. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement. It's honest. She leaned back in her chair. Caleb, I spent 28 years learning that people disappoint you, that promises get broken, that the people who claim to care about you will abandon you the moment you become inconvenient. I'm not going to abandon you. I want to believe that. I'm trying to believe it. Her voice was quiet. But trust isn't something I give easily. Not anymore. Caleb thought about his own walls, the defenses he'd built over 15 years of hard lessons, the certainty that depending on anyone was a guarantee of pain. I know what you mean, he said. I thought you might. They sat in silence. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind picked up, promising another storm. We're quite a pair, Maggie said eventually. Two people who don't trust anyone trying to build something together. Maybe that's why it works. Caleb stood, moving to add another log to the fire. We both know the risks. Neither of us is naive about what we're doing. You think that's enough? I think it's more than most people start with. He turned to face her. My parents married for love. It destroyed them both. At least we're going in with our eyes open. That's either very wise or very sad. Probably both. Maggie laughed. Soft and unexpected, it transformed her face into something almost beautiful. Probably both. she agreed. The wedding was 5 days away when the storm hit. Not the blizzard that would come later, that was still weeks off. This was a warning shot. 2 days of heavy snow that blocked the roads and trapped everyone indoors. Caleb spent the first day checking on the cattle with Sam, and the new hands making sure the herd was sheltered and fed. By the time he came back to the house frozen to the bone and exhausted, Maggie had hot coffee waiting and a fire blazing. "You look half dead," she said. "Feel it." He collapsed into a chair by the fire, too tired to move. "Lost 3 head in the north pasture. Couldn't find them in the drifts." "I'm sorry." "Part of the business." He closed his eyes. "Storm should break tomorrow. We'll search for them then." Maggie was quiet. He heard her move around the kitchen, heard water being poured, heard the soft sounds of domestic activity that had become familiar over the past 2 weeks. Then he felt warmth on his hands. He opened his eyes. She was kneeling beside him, pressing a hot cloth against his frozen fingers. "You'll get frostbite if you're not careful," she said. "I've survived worse." "That's not the point." She didn't look up. "The point is, you don't have to survive alone anymore." The words hit him harder than he expected. "Maggie, don't." She finally met his eyes. "Don't tell me you're fine. Don't tell me you don't need help. Don't push me away because accepting care feels like weakness." "I wasn't going to." "Yes, you were. I can see it in your face." Her hands tightened around his. "We're getting married in 5 days, Caleb. 5 days. And you're still acting like you have to handle everything yourself. Old habits. Then break them." Her voice was fierce. "I'm here. I'm staying. Let me help you." For a long moment, Caleb couldn't speak. Something was cracking inside him. Some wall he'd spent 15 years building finally giving way. "I don't know how," he admitted. "Don't know how to let someone in. Don't know how to need anyone." "Then learn." Maggie's expression softened. "I'll teach you. Same as you're teaching me about the ranch." "What if I fail?" "Then we try again." She squeezed his hands. "That's what partners do." Partners. The word had become something else between them. Not just a business arrangement. Not just a legal convenience. Something more. Something that felt dangerously like hope. "Okay," Caleb said quietly. "I'll try. That's all I'm asking." She released his hands and stood. "Now eat something before you fall asleep. I made stew." He ate. She sat across from him, not eating herself, just watching, making sure he finished. Taking care of him in ways no one had in 15 years. When he finally pushed back from the table, exhausted but warm, he found words he hadn't planned to say. "I'm glad you came here." Maggie looked up, surprised. "To Wyoming. To my ranch. To my life." Caleb held her gaze. "However this started, whatever brought us together, I'm glad you're here." Something shifted in her expression. Something that looked almost like tears. "I'm glad too," she whispered. The storm broke the next day. Caleb found 2 of the missing cattle alive, huddled in a ravine, cold but unharmed. The third was gone, probably taken by wolves. A loss, but not a disaster. He rode back to the ranch house feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The storm had passed. The wedding was in 4 days. And for the first time in his life, Caleb Hardin was actually looking forward to not being alone. Maggie was waiting on the porch when he arrived. "You found them." 2 of 3. He dismounted. "Better than I expected." "Good." She stepped forward, and for a moment he thought she might embrace him. Instead, she handed him a letter. "This came while you were out. Ryder from town." The envelope was official-looking, territorial seal. Caleb tore it open. His blood went cold. "What is it?" Maggie's voice was sharp. "Caleb, what's wrong?" He handed her the letter without speaking. Her eyes scanned the page. He watched the color drain from her face. "They're challenging the deed transfer," she said slowly. "Someone filed a complaint. They're claiming the joint ownership was fraudulent, that you transferred property to avoid the settlement requirements without a genuine marriage. We're getting married in 4 days. That's what they're counting on. Maggie's hands were shaking. They want to stop the wedding, prove it's a sham, take the land before we can establish a legitimate household. Who? Caleb's voice was deadly quiet. Who filed this? Maggie turned the page over. Her jaw tightened. Jacob Thornton. The name hit like a blow. Thornton owned the ranch south of Caleb's property. He'd tried to buy Iron Creek twice before offering well below market value. Both times Caleb had refused. He's been wanting this land for years, Caleb said. If he can prove the marriage is fraudulent, if he can get the deed transfer reversed, he gets a chance to buy it at auction. Maggie finished. Probably for a fraction of what it's worth. Rage built in Caleb's chest, hot and dark and dangerous. I'll kill him. No. Maggie grabbed his arm. That's exactly what he wants. You lose your temper, do something stupid, and he uses it against you. What am I supposed to do? Let him take everything? No. We fight back. Her grip tightened. We get married, not in 4 days tomorrow, before he can do anything to stop us. We establish our household document, everything proved that this is real. Tomorrow? Can you think of a reason to wait? Caleb looked at her. This woman he'd known for 2 weeks. Who'd walked into his life and changed everything? Who was standing beside him now, ready to fight for land she hadn't even known existed a month ago? No, he said. I can't think of a single reason. Then we ride to town. Now. Find the Reverend. Get married tonight if we have to. Maggie. He caught her hand, held it. Are you sure about this? I'm sure about us. Her eyes were steady. Whatever this started, as it's real now. At least to me. To me too. Then let's go make it official. They rode to town through the fading light, pushing the horses harder than was safe on the snow-covered roads. By the time they reached Cedar Flats, the sun was setting and the temperature was dropping fast. Reverend Whitmore answered his door with a Bible in one hand and a look of concern on his face. Mr. Hardin, Miss Sinclair, is something wrong? We need to get married, Caleb said. Tonight. Whitmore's eyebrows rose. Tonight, the ceremony was scheduled for... Plans changed. Maggie stepped forward. Please, Reverend. It's important. Something in her voice must have convinced him. Whitmore studied them both for a long moment, then nodded. Come inside. I'll send for witnesses. The ceremony took 20 minutes. Mrs. Owens served as witness along with the shopkeeper and his wife. They stood in the Reverend's small parlor surrounded by candles and the smell of wood smoke, while Whitmore spoke the words that would bind them together. Caleb barely heard any of it. He was too focused on Maggie, on her hand in his, on the steadiness of her voice when she said, I do. On the way, she looked at him when Whitmore pronounced them husband and wife, like she was seeing something she hadn't expected to find. You may kiss the bride, Whitmore said. They hadn't discussed this, hadn't planned for it. Caleb looked at Maggie. She looked back. Then she reached up, touched his face, and kissed him. It was brief, soft, chaste even, but it changed everything. Well then, Mrs. Owens said, dabbing at her eyes. That's done. Now what? Now what indeed? They signed the marriage certificate. Caleb's hand was steadier than he expected. Maggie's signature was firm and clear beside his. Husband and wife, partners in every sense that mattered. Thank you, Caleb told Whitmore, for doing this on short notice. Congratulations to you both. The Reverend's eyes were kind. Whatever brought you to this moment, I hope you find happiness in each other. We will? Maggie said, and for the first time Caleb believed it might be true. They rode back to the ranch in darkness. The cold was brutal, the road treacherous, but neither of them suggested stopping. They needed to be home, needed to be on their land in their house, starting their life together. When the ranch house finally came into view, Caleb felt something loosen in his chest. Home. For the first time in 7 years, the word meant something more than just a place to sleep. "We did it," Maggie said quietly. "We did. Thornton can't stop us now." "No, he can't." They dismounted in front of the house. Caleb took the horses to the barn, while Maggie went inside to start the fire. By the time he returned, the house was warm, and coffee was brewing. Maggie stood by the window looking out at the darkness. "Maggie." She turned. In the lamplight, her face was unreadable. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong," she said. "For someone to show up and tell us it doesn't count. That we're not really married. That none of this is real." Caleb crossed to her, took her hands. "It's real," he said. "You're my wife. This is our home. Nothing can change that now." "I want to believe you." "Then believe me." He pulled her closer. "I'm not good at this, Maggie. I don't know how to be married. Don't know how to be anything but alone. But I'm going to try. I'm going to try every single day to be the partner you deserve. That's all I need." Her voice was thick. "Just try. That's all I'm asking." "I will." She leaned into him. He wrapped his arms around her. They stood there in the quiet, two people who'd started as strangers and become something else entirely. Husband and wife. Partners. Maybe someday something more. "We should get some sleep," Maggie said eventually. "Tomorrow's going to be complicated." "Yeah." Caleb released her slowly. "About the sleeping arrangements." "One step at a time." She touched his face. "We have all winter to figure out the rest." "Okay." "Okay." She went to her room. He went to his. But for the first time, the walls between them felt less like barriers and more like temporary measures. Something that would change eventually when they were both ready. For now, it was enough. They were married. They were partners. They were together. And whatever Thornton threw at them next, they would face it side by side. Thornton came 3 days after the wedding. Caleb was in the barn when he heard the horses. 4 riders moving fast. He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside just as they crested the ridge. Jacob Thornton rode in front. 50 years old, silver-haired, dressed like he was going to church instead of crossing frozen territory. Behind him rode 3 men Caleb didn't recognize. Hard faces, hired muscle. Hardin. Thornton pulled up 20 feet from the barn. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Heard you got married in a hurry. Thought I'd come offer my congratulations. You can turn around and offer them from your own property." Now that's not very neighborly. Thornton dismounted slowly, deliberately. "Especially when I came all this way to discuss business. We got no business. That's where you're wrong." Thornton pulled a folded document from his coat. "I filed a challenge against your deed transfer. Judge Crawford's reviewing it now. If he finds the marriage fraudulent, everything you signed over to your wife reverts to territorial control. Marriage ain't fraudulent. We're legally wed." "Are you?" Thornton stepped closer. "Because from what I hear, you met that woman 2 weeks before the wedding. Never courted her. Never so much as bought her dinner. Just signed papers and called it love. What we call it ain't your concern. It is when it affects my interests." Thornton's voice hardened. "I've wanted this land for 5 years, Hardin. Made you fair offers. You refused. Now you're trying to game the system with a sham marriage, and I intend to prove it." The front door opened. Maggie stepped onto the porch. She wore a simple dress, her hair pinned up, her expression calm. But Caleb saw the steel beneath the surface. "Mr. Thornton," she said, "I don't believe we've been introduced." Thornton's eyes swept over her, dismissive, calculating. "Mrs. Hardin, I presume. The Philadelphia spinster who somehow became a rancher's wife overnight." "The same." Maggie descended the steps. I understand you've filed a complaint against our marriage. Against the deed transfer. The marriage is just a symptom. A symptom of what? Desperation. Fraud. A man trying to keep land he doesn't deserve by any means necessary. Maggie stopped 3 feet from Thornton. Despite being a foot shorter, she didn't look intimidated. Let me tell you what I see, Mr. Thornton. I see a man who couldn't buy what he wanted, so now he's trying to steal it through legal technicalities. I see a coward who hides behind paperwork instead of honest competition. Thornton's face reddened. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I reviewed the county records. You've filed similar challenges against 3 other ranchers in the past decade, won 2 of them, bought their land at auction for pennies on the dollar. Maggie's voice was ice. That's not business, Mr. Thornton. That's predation. You little... Careful. Caleb stepped forward, rifle still in his hands. That's my wife you're talking to. Thornton's eyes darted between them. The 3 men behind him shifted hands, moving toward their weapons. This isn't over, Thornton said finally. The judge will see through your little arrangement, and when he does, I'll be waiting. You do that. Maggie didn't blink. But know this, we're not going anywhere. This is our land, our home, and we'll fight for it with everything we have. Thornton mounted his horse, looked down at them with contempt. Enjoy it while it lasts. They rode away. Caleb didn't lower his rifle until they disappeared over the ridge. Then he turned to Maggie. That was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. Her composure cracked slightly. I've been wanting to say that to a man like him my entire life. You did good. I'm shaking. She held up her hands. They trembled visibly. I've never stood up to anyone like that before. Caleb set down the rifle and took her hands, steadied them. You were magnificent. I was terrified. Same thing sometimes. She laughed, shaky but real. What happens now? Now we prepare. Thornton ain't going to stop. He'll keep pushing until he gets what he wants, or we make him stop. How do we make him stop? Caleb thought about the 3 hard-faced men, about Thornton's connections in the territory, about all the ways a determined enemy could make their lives hell. I don't know yet, he admitted. But we'll figure it out. Together. The next week was tense. Thornton didn't return personally, but his presence was felt. Strange riders appeared at the edges of the property watching. Supplies ordered from town were delayed without explanation. When Caleb went to Cedar Flats for feed, the shopkeeper avoided his eyes and charged him double the usual price. Thornton's got people scared, Sam reported one evening. Half the town owes him money or favors. They're not going to risk his anger by helping us. What about the marshal? 3 days ride, same as always. And Thornton's got friends in the territorial government. Any complaint we file will take months to process. Caleb slammed his fist on the table. So we just wait. Let him squeeze us until we break. We don't break. Maggie's voice cut through his anger. We adapt. How? We become self-sufficient. Reduce our dependence on town. Stock up on everything we need to survive the winter without outside help. She was already making notes. We have cattle for meat. I can stretch the supplies we have. The hands can hunt for supplemental food. That's survival, not a solution. Survival is the first step. Solutions come later. Maggie looked up. Thornton wants us desperate, wants us to make mistakes. The best thing we can do right now is deny him that satisfaction. She was right. Caleb knew she was right, but the helplessness ate at him. He'd spent 7 years building this ranch through sheer force of will. Now, some rich man with political connections was trying to take it, and there was nothing Caleb could do except hunker down and wait. It went against every instinct he had. There's something else, Maggie said quietly. Something I didn't want to mention in front of the others. What? The cattle losses. They've increased. Caleb's blood went cold. How much? 20 head in the past week. Not natural losses theft. Someone's cutting the fences at night driving cattle south. Billy Crane. Probably. But I think Thornton's behind it. The timing's too convenient. Maggie's jaw tightened. He's trying to bleed us dry. Make the ranch worthless before he can take it. Son of a bitch. Exactly. Caleb paced the room. 20 head. At current prices, that was a significant loss. Another month like this, and they'd be in real trouble. We need to catch them, he said. Get proof that Thornton's involved. Then we take it to the marshal, the judge, anyone who will listen. How we can't watch the entire property every night. We don't need to watch all of it, just predict where they'll strike next. Caleb grabbed the map of the property he kept on the wall. They've been hitting the eastern pastures. The fence line there is hardest to monitor, too far from the house, too much rough terrain. So we move the cattle. Or we let them think we're not paying attention. Set a trap. Maggie studied the map. That's dangerous. If they're working for Thornton, they might be armed. They're definitely armed, but we're not helpless either. Caleb traced the eastern fence line with his finger. There's a natural choke point here where the ravine narrows. If they're driving cattle out, they have to come through there. We could set up a watch, catch them in the act. We'd need more than just you, and the hands. Sam's reliable. Pete and Wilson I'm less sure about, but we don't have a choice. Maggie was quiet for a moment. Then she straightened. I'm coming with you. Maggie. Don't. Her voice was sharp. Don't tell me to stay home where it's safe. We're partners, remember. Your fights are my fights. This isn't about partnership. It's about not getting you killed. And what about getting you killed? You think I'll just sit here waiting to find out if my husband's been shot? Her eyes blazed. I can ride. I can shoot. I'm not deadweight, Caleb. I never said you were. Then stop treating me like something fragile. I survived 28 years of people telling me I wasn't strong enough, smart enough, good enough. I didn't come all this way to be protected from my own life. The words hit hard. Caleb looked at this woman, his wife, and saw something he'd missed before. Not just intelligence or determination, but a fierce, desperate need to prove herself. To be seen as capable. To matter. The same need that had driven him to build this ranch from nothing. Okay, he said quietly. You come. But you stay behind me, and if things go bad, you run. No arguments. I can agree to those terms. I mean it, Maggie. If something happens to me, the ranch needs you. Don't throw that away trying to be a hero. Something softened in her expression. Nothing's going to happen to you. You don't know that? No. She crossed to him, took his hand. But I choose to believe it anyway. That's what hope is. Hope. Caleb had almost forgotten what that felt like. All right, he said. Tomorrow night. We set the trap. They planned through the evening. Sam would take position on the ridge above the choke point. Caleb and Maggie would wait in the ravine itself, hidden among the rocks. Pete and Wilson would patrol the other fence lines, maintaining the appearance of normal routine. If the rustlers came through the choke point, they'd be trapped. Outnumbered. Forced to surrender or face the consequences. If they came through somewhere else, the whole plan was worthless. It's a risk, Caleb admitted as they finalized details, but I don't see another option. Then we take the risk. Maggie's voice was steady. What's the alternative? Watch them steal everything we have. No, that's not an alternative. Then we do this. That night, they went to bed in their separate rooms. But Caleb couldn't sleep. He lay in darkness, listening to the wind, thinking about everything that could go wrong. Around midnight, he heard movement. His door opened. Maggie. I couldn't sleep either. Her voice was soft in the darkness. I keep thinking about tomorrow. About what might happen. We'll be okay. You don't know that. He heard her move closer. Felt the bed shift as she sat on its edge. Caleb, I need to tell you something. in case tomorrow goes wrong. Nothing's going to... Please, let me say this. He fell silent. When I agreed to marry you, I told myself it was practical, a business arrangement. Two people helping each other survive. Her hand found his in the darkness. But it stopped being that. Somewhere between the first night and now it became something else. Something I wasn't expecting. Maggie, I care about you. The words came out rushed, almost desperate. Not just as a partner or a husband of convenience. I actually care. About you, about us, about whatever this is becoming. Caleb's heart was pounding. I care about you too. You don't have to say that just because I'm not just saying it. He sat up, finding her face in the darkness. Maggie, I spent 15 years convincing myself I didn't need anyone, that being alone was safer than risking pain. Then you showed up and dismantled everything I thought I knew. I didn't mean to. I know. That's what makes it real. His thumb traced her cheek. I don't know what this is either. Don't know where it's going. But I know I don't want to face tomorrow without telling you that you matter. That whatever happens, meeting you was the best thing that's come from this whole mess. She leaned into his touch. Can I stay here tonight? Just stay. Nothing more. I just don't want to be alone right now. Yeah. His voice was rough. Yeah, you can stay. She lay down beside him. He wrapped his arm around her. She fit against him like she'd been there all along. Neither of them spoke again. But in the darkness, something shifted between them. Some final barrier crumbling. They weren't strangers anymore. They weren't even partners. They were becoming something neither of them had words for yet. The next night was cold and clear. Caleb and Maggie positioned themselves in the ravine shortly after dark. Sam was on the ridge, invisible in the shadows. The cattle grazed peacefully in the eastern pasture, unaware of the trap being set around them. Hours passed. The cold seeped through their coats into their bones. Maggie pressed against Caleb's side for warmth, her breath misting in the moonlight. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing to say that hadn't already been said. Sometime after midnight, Caleb heard it. Horses. Moving quietly, but not quietly enough. Coming from the southeast. He touched Maggie's arm. She stiffened. 3 riders emerged from the darkness. Caleb recognized Billy Crane in front his cousin Pete's face, a pale blur beside him. Pete, their own hand, working with the rustlers all along. The betrayal burned in Caleb's chest. The riders reached the cattle and began cutting them from the herd. Professional. Efficient. They'd done this before. Caleb waited until they'd committed. Until there was no pretending this was anything other than what it was. Then he stepped from the shadows, rifle raised. That's far enough. Billy Crane's spun hand going for his gun. Don't. Caleb's voice was ice. I've got Sam on the ridge with a clear shot. You twitch wrong, you're dead. Billy's hand froze. Pete's face had gone white. Caleb, I can explain. No, you can't. Maggie emerged beside Caleb, her own weapon drawn. You've been stealing from us since you arrived. We have the records, the fence cuts, the patterns. It wasn't my idea. Thornton paid us good. That's not an explanation. That's a confession. The third rider, a man Caleb didn't recognize, shifted in his saddle. Don't, Sam called from the ridge. I've got a bead on you. The man froze. Here's what's going to happen, Caleb said. You're going to ride with us to town. You're going to tell the marshal everything, who paid you, what you were told to do, all of it. And then you're going to pray I don't shoot you anyway. Thornton will kill us, Billy said. We talk, we're dead men. You don't talk, you're dead men now. Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. Choose. Billy looked at Pete, at the third rider, back at Caleb. Fine, we'll talk. The ride to town took 4 hours. Caleb kept the prisoners at gunpoint the entire way. Maggie rode beside him, exhausted, but alert. Sam brought up the rear, making sure no one tried to run. They reached Cedar Flats as dawn broke over the mountains. The marshal's office was a small building near the center of town. Marshal Davies, a grizzled man in his 50s, who'd been enforcing territorial law for decades, looked up as they entered. "Hardin, what's this?" "Caught these men rustling my cattle. They're ready to talk about who's been paying them." Davies' eyes widened. Over the next 2 hours, Billy Crane spilled everything. Thornton had hired them months ago, paid them to steal cattle sabotage equipment, do whatever it took to make Iron Creek Ranch fail. The goal was simple: drive Caleb to bankruptcy, then buy the land at auction. Pete corroborated every word. By the time they finished, Davies had enough to arrest Thornton himself. "This won't be simple," Davies warned. "Thornton's got connections, friends in high places. Even with testimony, it could take months to bring charges." "But you can stop him from taking our land." "Yes. This testimony invalidates his challenge against your deed. Whatever else happens, your property is secure." Secure. The word washed over Caleb like warm water. He turned to Maggie. She was swaying with exhaustion, her face pale, but her eyes bright. "We did it," she whispered. "We did." "It's over." "Not quite." Caleb took her hand. "Thornton's still out there, still dangerous, but his main weapon's gone. We're safe for now." "For now." She squeezed his fingers. "That's enough. For now is enough." They rode home as the sun climbed higher. The ranch looked the same as it always did: the house, the barn, the corral, the pastures spreading toward the mountains. But something had changed, something fundamental. It wasn't just land anymore. It was home. Their home. "I need to sleep for a week," Maggie said as they dismounted. "You earned it." "So did you." She turned to face him. "Caleb, thank you." "For what?" "For letting me be part of this. For treating me like a partner. For not making me stay behind. You saved us tonight. Your planning, your records, your courage." He shook his head. "I couldn't have done this alone." "You're not alone. Not anymore." The words hit differently now, after everything they'd been through, after what they'd said to each other in the darkness. "No," Caleb agreed. "I'm not." She reached up and kissed him, soft, brief, but full of promise. "Let's go home," she said. Home. He liked the sound of that. The peace lasted 12 days. 12 days of quiet, of routine, of falling into patterns that felt almost normal. Caleb worked the ranch while Maggie managed the house and accounts. They ate meals together, talked in the evenings, and slept in the same bed, still chaste, still careful, but closer than they'd ever been. Thornton had gone quiet since the arrests. His men were in custody, his scheme exposed. Marshal Davies had warned him to stay away from Iron Creek property, and for once, the man seemed to be listening. Caleb should have known it wouldn't last. The blizzard came without warning. One morning the sky was clear. By noon, clouds had swallowed the mountains. By evening, the wind was screaming and snow fell so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. "This is bad," Sam said, stamping snow from his boots as he came inside. "Worse than anything I've seen in 5 years." "How are the cattle?" "Moved them to the South Valley, like you said. They're sheltered for now. But if this keeps up..." He shook his head. "We could lose half the herd." Caleb looked out the window. Nothing but white. The barn was invisible 50 feet away. "We waited out. Nothing else we can do." The storm raged for 2 days. They huddled in the house, keeping the fire burning, rationing supplies. Maggie cooked meals that stretched further than they should have. Caleb checked the horses in the barn during brief lulls, fighting through drifts that reached his waist. On the third morning, the wind died. Caleb stood on the porch, surveying the damage. Snow had piled against the house in massive drifts. The path to the barn was completely buried. And out there somewhere in the white wilderness, 200 cattle were either alive or dead. "I have to check on them," he said. Maggie came up beside him. It's too dangerous. The temperature... I know what the temperature is, but if the cattle are trapped, if they can't get to water or food, they'll die anyway. He was already pulling on his heaviest coat. I'll take Sam. We'll be back before dark. Caleb. I have to do this, Maggie. You know I do. She did know. He could see it in her eyes. The ranch was everything. Without the cattle, they had nothing. Be careful, she said quietly. Always am. He kissed her forehead and headed for the barn. The ride to the South Valley took 3 times longer than usual. The snow was deep, the drifts treacherous. Sam's horse stumbled twice, nearly throwing him. Caleb's own mount was laboring hard by the time they reached the first ridge. There, Sam pointed. The cattle had clustered in the lowest part of the valley, huddled together for warmth. Most were still standing, a good sign. But as they got closer, Caleb saw the bodies. A dozen at least frozen where they'd fallen. Could be worse, Sam said. Could be better. Caleb dismounted, wading through snow to check on the living animals. They were weak but alive, hungry, scared. We need to break a path to the creek. Get them water. They worked for hours, breaking ice, clearing snow, driving the weaker animals toward water and the feed they'd stored before the storm. It was brutal, exhausting work, and the cold never let up. By late afternoon, they'd done what they could. We should head back, Sam said. His face was red with windburn, his movements sluggish. It'll be dark in an hour. You go. I want to check the north pasture. Caleb, that's another hour each way. In this cold? I know, but if there are cattle trapped up there, they won't survive another night. Neither will you if you freeze to death. I'll be fine. Caleb mounted his horse. Tell Maggie I'll be home before midnight. Don't let her worry. Sam's expression said he knew that was impossible, but he nodded and turned toward home. Caleb rode north. The temperature dropped as the sun set. Caleb could feel it in his bones, a deep, penetrating cold that no amount of clothing could stop. His fingers went numb inside his gloves. His face burned where the wind touched it. But he kept going. Had to keep going. The ranch depended on it. Maggie depended on it. He found the cattle in a ravine, 20 head huddled against a rock face. Alive barely. He spent an hour breaking them free, driving them toward lower ground where they might survive the night. By the time he finished, it was full dark. And that's when he realized he was lost. The storm had changed the landscape. Landmarks he'd known for 7 years were buried or altered. The trail he'd followed was invisible under fresh snow, and the cold was getting worse. Caleb tried to retrace his path. Failed. Tried again. Failed again. His horse was stumbling now, exhausted beyond recovery. Caleb dismounted, leading the animal by the reins, searching desperately for anything familiar. Nothing. Just snow and darkness and cold that was slowly killing him. He made it another mile before his legs gave out. The snow received him almost gently. Soft. Quiet. Not so bad, really, once you stopped fighting it. The cold didn't hurt anymore. That was probably a bad sign some distant part of his brain noted. But it was hard to care. Hard to care about anything. His thoughts drifted to Maggie. Her face. Her voice. The way she'd looked at him that last morning, worry creasing her forehead. Be careful, she'd said. Always am, he'd answered. Liar. He closed his eyes. Just for a moment. Just to rest. Just... Maggie knew something was wrong when midnight came and went. She'd been pacing for hours, watching the window, listening for hoofbeats that never came. Sam had returned at dusk with Caleb's message, and she'd tried to believe it. Tried to trust that he knew what he was doing. But midnight passed. Then 1 o'clock. Then 2. He's not coming back on his own, she said. Sam stood by the fire, his face grim. Mrs. Harden, in this cold in the dark. I know what you're going to say. It's too dangerous. We should wait until dawn. We'd just get lost ourselves. She grabbed her coat. I don't care. Maggie, he's my husband. The words came out fierce, desperate. He's out there somewhere, maybe hurt, maybe dying, and you want me to sit here by the fire and wait? I want you to survive. That's what Caleb would want too. Caleb doesn't get to decide for me anymore. She was already pulling on gloves, wrapping a scarf around her face. I'm going. You can come with me or stay here. Your choice. Sam looked at her for a long moment. Then he grabbed his own coat. Wilson, he called. Saddle 3 horses. We're riding out. They left within the hour. Maggie led the way, following the route Sam described toward the north pasture. The moon had risen, casting silver light across the snow. Beautiful in a terrible way, like a painting of death. She pushed the thought away. Caleb. She called his name into the wind. Caleb. Nothing. They rode for an hour, then 2. The cold was vicious, biting through every layer she wore. Her face was numb. Her fingers ached despite the gloves, but she kept going. She had to keep going. There, Wilson pointed. A shape in the snow, too big to be adrift. Maggie's heart stopped. She spurred her horse forward, leaping from the saddle before the animal fully stopped. She fell to her knees beside the shape, brushing away snow with frantic hands. Caleb. He was still, so still. His face was white, his lips blue, his eyes closed. No. The word tore from her throat. No, no, no. She pressed her hand to his chest. Felt nothing. Pressed harder. There. A heartbeat. Weak. Irregular. But there. He's alive. She was crying now, tears freezing on her cheeks. Sam, he's alive. They worked fast, wrapped him in blankets, loaded him onto the travois Wilson had thought to bring, started the long journey home. Maggie rode beside the travois, one hand on Caleb's chest, feeling for his heartbeat. It was there, still there, barely there. Don't you dare, she whispered. Don't you dare leave me, not now, not after everything. He didn't respond, but he didn't die either. They reached the ranch house at dawn. Sam and Wilson carried Caleb inside while Maggie prepared the bedroom, stoked the fire until the room was sweltering, piled blankets on the bed, heated water for warm cloths. Then she went to work. She stripped off his frozen clothes with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, wrapped him in heated blankets, pressed warm cloths to his chest, his arms, his legs, talked to him constantly, even though he couldn't hear. You stubborn, impossible man. You promised me. You promised you'd be careful. And then you go and nearly kill yourself over some stupid cattle. His skin was warming. Slowly. Too slowly. I didn't come 2,000 miles to be a widow, Caleb. I didn't agree to this marriage just to lose you. So you're going to wake up. You're going to be fine. And then I'm going to be furious with you for the rest of our lives. Hours passed. Sam brought food she didn't eat, coffee she barely touched. He offered to take over, give her a break. She refused. He's my husband, she said. I'm not leaving him. The fever came in the afternoon. His body, fighting the cold damage, began to burn instead. He thrashed, moaned, called out names she didn't recognize. His skin went from ice cold to furnace hot. Maggie fought that too, cool cloths on his forehead. Water dripped between his cracked lips. Prayers she hadn't said since childhood whispered into the silence. Please, please, please. Somewhere in the darkness, his darkness, not the world's Caleb, became aware of warmth. It was wrong. He shouldn't be warm. He'd been cold. So cold. Cold that went all the way down to his soul and stayed there. But now there was warmth. And a voice. Maggie's voice. Stubborn man. Promised me. Going to wake up. He tried to open his eyes. Couldn't. Tried to speak. Couldn't do that either. But he could hear her, could feel her hand in his, could sense her presence beside him like a fire in the darkness. She'd found him. Somehow, impossibly, she'd found him. He tried to hold on to consciousness, to let her know he was still there. But the darkness was heavy, and he was so tired. He let go, and fell. Maggie saw the moment he slipped away. Not death, the fever hadn't taken him that far. But something changed in his face. Some struggle she'd been watching ended. He went still, quiet, peaceful almost. No. She gripped his hand harder. Caleb, stay with me. Don't go where I can't follow. His heartbeat steadied. His breathing deepened. And then slowly, his eyes opened. Maggie. The word was barely a whisper, cracked and rough and the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. I'm here. She was crying again. I'm right here. You found me. Of course I found you. You think I'd let you die out there alone? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Should have stayed. Home. Dangerous. Everything worth doing is dangerous. She pressed her forehead to his. Don't you ever do that to me again. Do you understand? Never again. I'm sorry. You should be. Thought about you. His voice was getting stronger. When I was out there. Thought about how I never told you. Told me what? He raised his hand, weak, trembling, and touched her face. I love you. The words hit her like a physical blow. Caleb, no, it's too soon. No, we barely, but I do. I love you, Maggie. Wanted you to know. In case. There is no in case. She grabbed his hand, held it against her cheek. You're going to be fine. You're going to recover. And we're going to have years to figure this out. Do you? He swallowed hard. Do you feel? Yes. The word came out before she could stop it. Yes, I feel it too. I don't know when it happened or how, but I do. I love you, Caleb. I love your stubborn, impossible, nearly got yourself killed self. His smile widened, weak but real. Good. That's good. Now rest. You need to heal. Stay with me. Always. She lay down beside him, careful not to jostle his battered body. I'm not going anywhere. His arm found its way around her, weak, but present. They lay together in the dim room, and for the first time since she'd found him in the snow, Maggie let herself believe he would survive. The recovery was slow. Days of fever and chills and weakness that kept Caleb bedridden. Maggie rarely left his side. She fed him broth when he could stomach it, changed his bandages when the frostbite blisters wept, talked to him through the long nights when pain kept him from sleeping, and gradually he got better. The fever broke on the 4th day. The color returned to his face on the 5th. By the end of the week, he was sitting up demanding to know what was happening with the ranch. The ranch is fine, Maggie told him firmly. Sam and Wilson are handling everything. You just worry about getting better. I've been in this bed for a week. And you'll be in it another week if that's what it takes. She pressed a hand to his chest when he tried to rise. Caleb, you almost died. Your body needs time to heal. My body is fine. Your body is a mess. The doctor said, the doctor's a drunk who charges too much and knows too little. The doctor said you're lucky to still have all your fingers and toes. Another hour out there and you'd be losing limbs. That shut him up. You need to rest, Maggie said gentler now. I know it's hard. I know you're not used to depending on anyone. But this is what partnership means, Caleb. You take care of me. I take care of you. That's the deal. He was quiet for a long moment. I'm not good at this, he said finally. Being taken care of. Being vulnerable. Needing help. It makes me feel... He searched for the word. Weak. You almost died trying to prove you were strong. How did that work out? A bitter laugh. Point taken. Maggie sat on the edge of the bed, taking his hand. You're not weak, Caleb. You're one of the strongest people I've ever known. But strength isn't about never needing anyone. It's about having the courage to need someone and trust them anyway. That's terrifying. I know. She squeezed his hand. But I'm terrified too. Every time you ride out, every time you push yourself too hard, I'm scared I'll lose you. That's what love is. Being scared and choosing each other anyway. He was quiet again, processing. When I was out there, he said slowly, lying in the snow thinking I was going to die, the only thing I regretted was not telling you how I felt, not being brave enough to say the words. You said them. Because I thought I was dying. That doesn't count. It counts. Maggie lifted his hand to her lips, kissed his battered knuckles. But if you need to say it again when you're not delirious with fever, I'm listening. I love you, Maggie. The words came easier this time. Not because you saved my life, though you did. Not because you're my wife, though you are. Because you're you. Because you challenge me and support me and refuse to let me be less than I can be. That's better. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I love you too. For the record. Good. Now can I get out of this damn bed? No. Maggie. Tomorrow. If your fever stays down and you eat a full meal, you can sit in a chair tomorrow. A chair, generous. Take it or leave it. He took it. And for the first time since the storm, Maggie felt something she'd almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. Real hope. Not just for survival, not just for the ranch, but for them, for what they were becoming, for the future they might build together. It was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely worth the risk. Later that night, after Caleb had fallen into an exhausted sleep, Maggie sat by the window watching the snowfall. The storm was over. The worst had passed. But the marks it left would linger. On the land, on the cattle they'd lost, on Caleb's body, and on them, on their marriage, on whatever this had become. She'd told him she loved him, had meant it, still meant it, but saying the words was easy. Living them was something else entirely. Caleb was going to recover, would be back on his feet in a week, probably pushing himself too hard again within 2. That was who he was. A man who didn't know how to slow down, how to ask for help, how to need anyone. She'd known that going in, but she'd also seen him change, bit by bit, day by day, opening up to her, trusting her, letting her in. That was something. That was enough. She looked back at the bed where her husband slept. This stubborn, impossible, nearly got himself killed man, hers, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. She'd meant those vows when she said them. Meant them more now. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. That was the deal. And Maggie Harden always kept her word. Spring came slowly to Wyoming. The snow retreated inch by inch, revealing brown grass and muddy earth. The creek swelled with meltwater. The cattle grew restless in the lower pastures, sensing the change in season. And Caleb healed. Not just his body, though, that took time too. The frostbite scars on his hands would never fully fade. The weakness in his legs lasted weeks. But the deeper healing, the kind Maggie couldn't see but sensed anyway, that was what mattered. He stopped fighting her. Not about the big things they still argued about the ranch, about money, about how much risk was too much. But the small battles, the ones about accepting help and sharing burdens and letting her be his partner, in more than name, those ended. I need to check the north fence, he said one morning, 3 weeks after the storm. We need to check it, Maggie corrected. I'm coming with you. He didn't argue, just nodded, handed her the reins of her horse, and rode out beside her. Progress. The fence was damaged in several places, wire stretched or broken posts, leaning at angles. They spent the morning making repairs, working side by side with an efficiency born of practice. Remember when you couldn't tell a fence post from a hitching rail? Caleb asked. Remember when you thought I couldn't ride? He smiled. That smile she'd grown to love, reluctant, rare, but genuine when it appeared. You've changed, he said. So have you. Have I? Maggie straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead. The man I married wouldn't have let me ride out here with him. Wouldn't have trusted me to help with repairs. Would have insisted on doing everything himself. The man you married was an idiot. He was scared. She crossed to him, took his hand. There's a difference. Caleb looked at their joined hands, rough and calloused and scarred. His from years of ranching, hers from months of becoming a rancher. I'm still scared, he admitted. Every day. That this won't last. That I'll mess it up somehow. That you'll realize you made a mistake and... Stop. Maggie squeezed his hand. I'm not leaving. I've told you that 100 times. I know. I'm trying to believe it. Then try harder. She pulled him toward her, kissed him with the confidence of someone who knew she belonged. I'm here, Caleb. I chose you. I keep choosing you. When will that be enough? I don't know. His voice was rough. Maybe never. Maybe the fear never goes away completely. Then we live with it together. That's what marriage is. He wrapped his arms around her, holding tight. How'd I get so lucky? You weren't lucky. You were desperate. I happened to be convenient. That's not true anymore. No. She smiled against his chest. It isn't. They finished the fence repairs and rode home together. That night, lying in bed, Caleb made a decision. Maggie. She was half asleep, warm and content beside him. I want to do this right. Do what right? Us. Our marriage. He sat up, reaching for something on the bedside table. When we got married, it was rushed. Legal necessity. I didn't even have a ring. I didn't need a ring. But you deserved one. He pressed something into her hand. Cool metal, smooth stone. Maggie opened her palm. A ring sat there, simple gold band with a small green stone that caught the lamplight. It was my mother's, Caleb said quietly. The only thing of hers I have. My father pawned everything else, but I hid this. Carried it for 15 years, never knowing why. Caleb, I know why now. He took the ring from her palm, held it up. Margaret Sinclair Hardin, will you marry me for real this time? Not because the law demanded it. Not because we were both desperate, but because I love you. Because I want to spend the rest of my life waking up beside you. Her eyes were wet. We're already married. I know. I'm asking anyway. She laughed, a watery sound choked with emotion. Yes, of course yes. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. There, he said. Now it's official. It was always official. Now it's real. She kissed him, then pulling him down to her with an urgency that had been building for months. This time, neither of them held back. Afterward, tangled together in the darkness, Maggie traced the scars on his hands. Tell me about her, she said. Your mother. Caleb was quiet for a moment. He never talked about his mother, never let himself remember. She was strong, he said finally. Stronger than my father, though she never let him know it. She kept us together through every one of his schemes, every failed venture, every broken promise. You loved her. More than anything. His voice caught. When she died, it felt like the world ended. I was 11, too young to understand why, too old to believe it wasn't my fault. It wasn't. I know that now, didn't know it then. He turned to face her. She would have liked you. You think so? I know so. She always said I needed someone who could stand up to me, someone who wouldn't let me hide behind walls. He touched Maggie's face. She was right. I wish I could have met her. Me too. They lay in silence, holding each other. Outside, the wind had died down. The world was quiet and still. Caleb. Yeah. I want to have a baby. The words hung in the air. What? Not right now. Not until we're more stable. But someday. She propped herself up on one elbow. I never thought I'd want children. Never thought I'd have the chance. But with you in this life we're building. I can imagine it now. A baby. Caleb tried out the word. Our baby. Is that? Do you want that? He thought about it, really thought. He'd never imagined being a father. Had assumed he'd die alone on this ranch. No family, no legacy, just the land and the cattle and the silence. But that was before Maggie. Yeah, he said slowly. I want that, with you. Her smile was radiant. We don't have to decide anything now. I just wanted you to know. To start thinking about the future. Our future. Our future. He pulled her close. I like the sound of that. The next morning, a rider came from town. Sam brought the message to the house, a sealed envelope with the territorial court stamp. This can't be good, Caleb muttered, tearing it open. He read the letter twice, then handed it to Maggie. Thornton's dead. What? Shot trying to escape custody. He'd been transferred to the territorial prison, tried to run guard, put a bullet in him. Caleb shook his head. It's over, all of it. Maggie scanned the letter. The courts dismissed all pending challenges against our deed. The criminal charges against Billy Crane and his men are proceeding. Our property rights are fully confirmed. No more threats. No more looking over our shoulders. They stood in the kitchen, the letter between them, and let the reality sink in. For months, they'd been fighting. Against the law, against Thornton, against the rustlers and the weather and their own fears. Now suddenly, there was nothing to fight. Just a ranch, a marriage, a future. What do we do now? Maggie asked. I don't know. Caleb laughed, surprised by the sound. I've been fighting so long I'm not sure what peace looks like. Maybe it looks like this. She gestured at the kitchen, the house, the window where morning light was streaming in. Maybe it looks like breakfast and fence repairs and arguing about whether to expand the herd. That sounds boring. That sounds wonderful. He pulled her into his arms. Yeah, it does. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Caleb's life. Not because anything dramatic happened. No threats, no crises, no near-death experiences, just life. He and Maggie developed a rhythm. Early mornings together, coffee and conversation before the day's work began. Long days of labor separate sometimes together when they could manage it. Evenings by the fire reading or talking or simply existing in the same space. And nights. Nights that still felt new and miraculous, even after everything. You're different, Sam observed one afternoon. They were moving cattle to spring pasture, the kind of mundane work that used to fill Caleb with restless energy. Different how? Happier, more present. Sam shrugged. Before Mrs. Harden came, you were always somewhere else in your head, always planning the next thing, worrying about the next problem. Now you're here. Is that bad? It's good, real good. Sam smiled. Marriage suits you, boss. Don't tell her that. She'll get smug. Too late. Sam nodded toward the ridge where Maggie was riding toward them. She already knows. Caleb watched his wife approach. She sat a horse like she'd been born to it now. Her hair had come loose from its braids streaming behind her in the wind. Her face was tanned from sun, her hands calloused from work. She'd never looked more beautiful. What are you staring at? She called as she drew closer. My wife. Your wife has news. She pulled up beside him, breathless. I just came from town. The bank approved the loan. We can buy the Morrison property. The Morrison property. 60 acres bordering their southern fence with a natural spring that never ran dry. They'd talked about trying to acquire it, but the asking price was steep. They approved the full amount. Full amount. 5% interest. Banker said our accounts showed exceptional management. She grinned. I think he meant my accounting. Probably did. Caleb felt a smile spreading across his face. So we're expanding. We're expanding, if you agree. I agree. He leaned across the gap between their horses and kissed her. I agree to everything you say for the rest of our lives. I'm holding you to that. I know. That's why I said it. They rode back to the ranch house together, already making plans. Where to extend the fencing, how to integrate the new acreage, whether to increase the herd or diversify into horses. Partners. In everything. The way it was always supposed to be. Summer arrived in full force. The days grew long and hot. The cattle fattened on new grass. The ranch hummed with activity repairs and improvements, and the endless cycle of ranch work. And Maggie grew round with child. She'd suspected for weeks before she told Caleb. Wanted to be sure. Wanted to see the doctor in town and confirm it before saying anything. But keeping secrets from him was impossible now. He knew her too well. Something's wrong, he said one evening. You've been distracted for days. What is it? Nothing's wrong. She took his hand, placed it on her belly. Something's right. He didn't understand at first. Then his eyes widened. You're pregnant. Yes. 3 months according to the doctor. Caleb's face went through a dozen emotions in as many seconds. Shock, joy, terror, wonder, and underneath it all, a vulnerability she rarely saw him show. A baby, he whispered. Our baby. I know we said we'd wait until we were more stable, but to hell with stable. He pulled her into his arms laughing, actually laughing free and unguarded. Maggie, this is everything. You're happy. Happy doesn't cover it. He pulled back to look at her face. Are you happy? Terrified, excited, overwhelmed. She smiled through sudden tears. Yes, I'm happy. We're going to be parents. We are. I don't know anything about babies. Neither do I. We'll learn together. That's what we do. He kissed her, then gentle and reverent, like she was something precious he couldn't believe he'd been trusted with. And maybe she was. Maybe they both were. Fall came. Maggie's belly grew. The ranch prospered. The Morrison property was officially theirs, and plans for expansion were well underway. Caleb hired 2 more hands to help with the increased workload, carefully vetted this time with Maggie's input. No more Pete Cranes. No more betrayals. Just hard work and steady progress and a future that looked brighter every day. Caleb. They were on the porch watching the sunset. Maggie sat in the rocking chair he'd built for her, one hand resting on her swollen belly. Caleb sat on the steps, his back against the railing, close enough to touch. Yeah. Do you ever think about the day we met? Sometimes. What do you think about? He was quiet for a moment, considering. I think about how angry I was. At the law, at the judge, at the whole situation. He turned to look at her. I thought getting married was the worst thing that could happen to me. Thought I was giving up everything I'd worked for. And now? Now I know I was an idiot. He reached up, took her hand. The worst thing that could have happened to me was staying alone, staying closed off, spending the rest of my life proving I didn't need anyone. What about now? What do you need now? You. The word came without hesitation. Just you. Everything else, the ranch, the expansion, all of it. None of it matters without you. Maggie's eyes glistened. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said. Don't get used to it. Too late. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to purple to black. The first stars appeared bright and cold and eternal. I want our child to know this, Maggie said quietly. This peace, this certainty, that they're loved, that they belong. They will. Promised, I promise. He stood helping her rise from the chair. Let's go inside. It's getting cold. You're always trying to take care of me. Someone has to. I can take care of myself. I know. That's one of the things I love about you. He wrapped his arm around her as they walked toward the door. But you don't have to. Not anymore. She leaned into him. Neither do you. I know. I'm finally starting to believe it. The baby came in early December. A girl. 7 pounds with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. They named her Sarah after Caleb's mother. Caleb held her for the first time in the bedroom where she'd been born, this tiny creature who was somehow part of him. His hands shook, his vision blurred. She's perfect, he whispered. She's hungry, Maggie corrected, exhausted but radiant. Give her here. He handed the baby over carefully like she might shatter if he moved too fast. Watched as Maggie guided Sarah to her breast as natural as breathing. You're good at this, he said. I've had 9 months to prepare. She looked up at him. How do you feel? Terrified. That's normal. And grateful. And overwhelmed. And, he searched for the word. Complete. Complete, like something I didn't know was missing, finally clicked into place. He sat on the edge of the bed, one hand on Maggie's shoulder, the other resting near Sarah's tiny foot. I spent 15 years building walls, telling myself I was safe, but I wasn't safe, Maggie. I was empty. And now I'm full. His voice was thick, fuller than I ever knew I could be. Maggie leaned into him, their daughter between them. This is what you were building for, she said softly. All those years, all that work, you were building this, a family, a home, a life that matters. I didn't know it at the time. Most people don't. They just keep building and hope it leads somewhere good. Did it lead somewhere good? She looked at him with eyes full of love and exhaustion and absolute certainty. The best place I've ever been. Years later, Caleb would look back on that night as the moment everything changed. Not because Sarah was born, though that was part of it, but because something in him finally irrevocably healed. The last wall crumbled. The last fear released its grip. He had a family now. A wife who challenged him and supported him and loved him despite everything. A daughter who looked at him like he hung the moon. A home that was more than just land and buildings. A life. A real life. The kind his father had chased and never found. The kind his mother had dreamed of and never lived to see. The kind Caleb himself had given up on years ago. But Maggie hadn't given up on him. Had seen something worth saving in a broken man who didn't know how to let anyone in. And in saving him, she'd saved herself too. 2 people who swore they didn't need anyone. Who built walls so high they'd forgotten what the other side looked like. They'd found each other anyway. That was the miracle. That was the gift. That was everything. 20 years passed like water through fingers. The ranch grew. 3 children followed Sarah, 2 boys and another girl. The cattle operation expanded until Iron Creek Ranch was one of the largest in the territory. Caleb's hair went gray. Maggie's hands grew more weathered. But the love between them only deepened. They still argued, still challenged each other, still refused to back down from fights that mattered. But they also still chose each other. Every day, every moment. Through hard winters and dry summers and losses and triumphs and everything in between. On their 20th anniversary, they sat on the porch of the house Caleb had built with his own hands, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Sarah's oldest was 7 now, a wild-haired girl who reminded Caleb painfully of his mother. "Remember when you thought marriage was the worst thing that could happen to you?" Maggie asked. "I was an idiot." "You were scared." "Same thing sometimes." She laughed, and even after 20 years, the sound still made his heart skip. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked. "The forced marriage, the rocky start, all the times we nearly fell apart." Caleb thought about the question, really thought. "Not one moment," he said. Every hard time led us here. Every fight made us stronger. Every fear we faced together taught us how to love better. That's very philosophical for a cowboy. I've had a good teacher. She leaned her head against his shoulder. What do you think our lives would have looked like if the law hadn't forced you to find a wife? I'd probably be dead, frozen in some snowbank or shot by rustlers or just worn down to nothing. He wrapped his arm around her. You saved my life, Maggie, in every way that matters. You saved mine too. Then we're even. We're not even. We're one. She turned to look at him. That's what marriage is. Not keeping score, not measuring who gave more. Just being one thing together. One life, one future, one heart. He kissed her. 20 years of kisses, and each one still felt like a gift. I love you, he said. I know. I'm going to keep telling you anyway. I know that too. They sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that never got old, no matter how many times they saw them. And in the end, that was the story. Not of a forced marriage or a legal arrangement or two desperate people making the best of bad circumstances. It was the story of love. Real love. The kind that grows from respect and partnership and choosing each other every single day. The kind that transforms strangers into soulmates. The kind that proves again and again that vulnerability isn't weakness. That needing someone isn't failure. That the bravest thing any person can do is open their heart and trust another person to hold it carefully. Caleb Hardin had spent 15 years building walls. Maggie Sinclair had spent 28 years proving she didn't need anyone. They were both wrong, and they were both grateful. Because in the end, love wasn't about being strong enough to stand alone. It was about being brave enough to stand together, and that was exactly what they did, for the rest of their lives.